Support for Louisiana, the state we're in, is provided by
Entergy Louisiana is strengthening our power grid throughout the state. We're reinforcing infrastructure to prepare for stronger storms, reduce outages, and respond quicker when you do need us, because together we power life.
additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum, located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is a historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and viewers like you. Thank you.
While lawmakers work to streamline the state's tax system, popular programs like film tax credits could be on the chopping block.
Key players in the health world came together to look at ways to fix Louisiana's poor health outcomes.
And I'm taking you to the small town of Faraday to check out the area's big role in blues and rockabilly music.
And can the Saints' new interim coach keep the black and gold in the running for a spot in the postseason? Let's get started.
Let's do it. Hello everyone, I'm Karen LeBlanc.
And I'm Dorothea Wilson. Much more on those top stories in a moment on this week's edition of Louisiana, the state we're in. But first, Governor Jeff Landry's proposed overhaul of Louisiana's tax system is hitting roadblocks. This week, two bills that would boost the state's economy by adding new taxes on certain services faced tough opposition. Some lawmakers are concerned that adding sales tax to more than 40 services will add hardship to already struggling small businesses. And those services include things like online dating, car washes, pet grooming, and certain home improvements. Supporters say the added taxes would help offset the governor's plan to establish a flat 3% individual income tax rate. Critics are concerned the plan will mostly benefit large corporations.
Another part of the governor's plan would eliminate or reduce Louisiana's popular film tax credits. Governor Jeff Landry wants to end the program to help offset his proposed tax cuts. Some lawmakers have proposed ways to keep the incentives by implementing a lower cap or replacing the credits with direct grants. Here's a look at the debate and what's at stake for Louisiana's film industry.
The 2023 Disney movie Haunted Mansion was filmed in New Orleans, starring the Garden District and several French Quarter locales. It's one of the latest in a long list of film and TV credits dating back more than a century, when cameras rolled on the first movie set in Louisiana, Tarzan of the Apes, filmed in 1917 in Morgan City. To date, Louisiana has set the scene for more than 3,000 film projects. These were talking points made in a recent legislative committee meeting discussing the fate of the Louisiana Motion Picture Investor Tax Credit.
In 2002, Steve Scalise and Cedric Richmond, a bipartisan effort, put together a credit program to allow for productions to stay within the United States and try to get them to come to the state of Louisiana.
Louisiana was one of the first states to create a film tax credit program, which is now up for debate as lawmakers decide whether to nix the 20-plus year program. Some see the film industry as an ambassador to Louisiana and a boost to tourism.
The movie industry doesn't just provide jobs, but gets our brand out, and that leads to people coming to it's essentially advertising on a giant silver screen.
The film tax credit is part of a large packet of tax credits, incentives, and rebates targeted for elimination June 30th of 2025. The film industry supports tax reform, but warns not to throw the proverbial baby out with the bathwater because the program is a proven economic driver.
It's $180 million of a credit that needs to be certified over 2 years, as I mentioned to you, and that actually equates to $360 million in Louisiana local payroll. And if you look at it, $60 million in sales comes right on top of that. So you're giving $180 million to Louisiana residents, and you're getting a massive economic impact. That's a 6-to-1 benefit to the state of Louisiana.
Like, again, I think that maybe 10,000 jobs in Louisiana are dependent upon the industry's success here.
The proposed elimination of the film tax credit comes less than a year after lawmakers voted to extend it through 2031 under the previous administration of then Governor John Bel Edwards. Some argue this is bad optics for business development.
What do you think happens to the industry if the credit goes away?
Well, look, just like any industry, we want stability and predictability. And obviously, if you make any major change to an industry, we know that there is going to be course correction, there's going to be default, and we feel that some of that will come with this if we don't see this credit continue.
What's being proposed is to entirely rip the Band-Aid off.
I think that we all would support things like lowering the corporate income tax, which is ridiculously high in Louisiana. I think we all would support, lowering personal income tax to make it more attractive here. And they're thinking that by pulling away some of these incentives that they're just going to kind of rip off the Band-Aid. But the truth is, with something like this, an industry that's kind of like based around incentives when there's so much competition out there, it's almost like you're ripping the heart out of the industry.
The timing of the film tax credit sunset comes as Louisiana's production industry builds momentum, with 18 higher education institutions offering digital media and production training. And the Louisiana Academy of Production Charter School set to begin training high school students from underserved backgrounds for production jobs.
We're talking, 9th graders through 12th graders learning skills that they'll be able to get a job right out of high school. Again, sometimes this could be transformative wealth for some of these kids. I mean, we're talking, $60,000 jobs like at 18, 19 years old.
Advocates of the film tax credits argue the program delivers results and that there are win-win ways to modify the program, such as making film tax credits applicable to severance tax liability, thereby encouraging more drilling and more film and TV production.
The film program delivers a lot of the results that I think tax reform that we're all looking for.
Lights, camera, action, and economic development. Will lawmakers rewrite the script for Louisiana's film industry, killing off the program or keeping it in another form? That's the plot point as House Bills number 1 and 2 make their way through the legislative process.
In our follow-up file this week, a plan that would restore Social Security benefits to thousands of public employees in Louisiana has advanced in Congress. House lawmakers approved the Social Security Fairness Act. It would reverse the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset. Those limit Social Security benefits for public employees with pensions. The bipartisan legislation was spearheaded by Congressman Garrett Graves and Virginia Democrat Representative Abigail Spanberger. Now, if approved by the Senate, the bill would restore benefits for nearly 3 million public employees nationwide, including 90,000 here in Louisiana.
Meanwhile, Louisiana schools will not be required to display the 10 Commandments in public schools, at least for now. This week, a federal judge ruled the law unconstitutional. In the ruling, the judge said it unfairly forces kids to participate in a religious exercise. A group of families and educators sued, claiming the law violated students' right to freedom of religion. Attorney General Liz Muriel has appealed the ruling.
From hashtags to headlines, here's what's trending this week. 7 Louisiana natives are in the running for the Grammys.
That's right, Karen, and there is no surprise there because we are always well represented.
That's right. So let's go through the list. First up, we have New Orleans artist Lucky Daye nominated for Best Traditional R&B Performance and Best R&B Album.
And Tank and the Bangas up for Best Spoken Word Poetry Album. Tank hosted the popular digital series Ritual here on LPB.
Now we've got 4 Louisiana artists nominated for Best Regional Roots Album. They are Sean Ardoin and Creole Rock and Soul,
Big Chief Monk Boudreaux and the Golden Eagles,
New Breed Brass Band with Trombone Shorty,
The Rumble featuring Chief Joseph Boudreaux Jr. and none other than,
of course, John Baptiste. No surprise there. He is a Grammy favorite, and he is nominated for his Best Song Written for Visual Media and Best Music Film, and got a new album that just came out, and you've been listening to it.
Oh, I love it. Beethoven meets the blues, Karen. Oh, great work.
Gotta hear that.
All right, well, speaking of greatness coming from Louisiana, huge congratulations to Southern University's women's soccer team. They won their first ever SWAC championship in a match against Texas Southern, and the 5'5" California native Alyssa Romero was named the SWAC tournament's MVP. They advanced to the NCAA Division I championship, where they'll take on Mississippi State in the first round.
All right, we are cheering them on. All right, so here's some tasty news for you. A Lafayette cake artist is working her magic on a new Harry Potter themed baking show. Kayla Giddings is one of 17 contestants on Harry Potter Wizards of Baking. So they're going to make these spellbinding edible showpieces that are inspired by the movies. Now, Giddings, she's a huge Harry Potter fan, and she passed that on to her 11-year-old daughter. And she's been on quite a few other cooking shows. And I'm told her cakes are really hyper-realistic. So trick for the eye, treat for the tummy.
I love that. And speaking of tricks in the tummy and all great things, Louisiana, state leaders are bringing together the biggest minds in the medical world. They hope to reverse Louisiana's poor health ratings at the very first ever Healthy State Summit. Officials from numerous hospitals and health agencies came together to brainstorm solutions. Let's take a look.
According to a recent study done by the United Health Foundation, Louisiana has been ranked as the least healthy state in the country for the second consecutive year. This comes as cancer mortality rates have skyrocketed, diabetes cases have increased, and the overall state of health in Louisiana is at a record low. It's for those reasons that state officials decided to fight against our catastrophic stats by holding the inaugural Healthy State Summit, putting the state's most brilliant minds in a room together to discuss the health of the state we're in.
We call it our Healthy State Initiative, and it's really to be a catalyst and to be a collaborator with members throughout the state to address some of the barriers to our state health rankings.
The goal of the summit is to create a thriving Louisiana by providing resources and funding to quick start health initiatives and projects to raise awareness of the growing health concerns in the state. Deborah Grimes was one of the speakers at the summit. Being a 14-year breast cancer survivor, she understands the importance of getting our state's health affairs in order. She says it's critical that proper health care be accessible to all. Many rural areas across the state have little to no access to health care, resulting in people being taken away from their families way too soon.
And it's really simple. We want to live in a state where everybody, regardless of the region that they live in, regardless of their individual situations, has the possibility to remove all the barriers to being healthy. And we never want to see anybody die prematurely.
Ashley Bailey is a director at Oxeter Health. She has a similar sentiment to Deborah, but her why focused on the next generation. Bailey says if we get it right now, our children won't have to suffer.
A personal experience of my own. I am having challenges right now navigating the healthcare system around a child who has ADHD. And it has been an experience. And I would love to see this come together full circle where we can bring the right resources so that these kids have the support that they need to be successful. It impacts not just the kids, but the families, the teachers who are helping to support. It's just the whole community that ends up being impacted by this.
Bailey added that health affects us all, and she's proud to be a part of a company of people that will influence change, providing a brighter and healthier future for Louisiana.
It just gives me chills to know the lives that we're going to impact and change, and we're already doing it, but it's going to be a profound impact if we can continue to strengthen this initiative.
Saints fans are putting away their paper bags after enduring a gruesome 7-game losing streak. This comes as interim head coach Darren Reese showed up and showed out, leading the team to a long-awaited victory over the Atlanta Falcons last weekend.
Reese hit the ground running with some well-received changes leading up to the win. Sports correspondent Victor Howell sat down with Saints reporter Sarah Palczewski to look at what's next for the black and gold.
Finally, some good news for the black and gold. They get a win for the first time in now 8 weeks, and who better to talk about it with us than Sarah Palczewski? She's based out of Baton Rouge with NBC and Fox, WVLA and WGMB, and is the Saints beat reporter. Sarah, thanks for coming in. Hey, we're finally talking good news.
Absolutely. It's finally fun to talk about the Saints again. It's been a while.
It has been a while. And look, we know they beat Atlanta. That's the big news. But the bigger news is the fact that they made a coaching change midseason, something the Saints are not known for doing. But Dennis Allen was let go. Darren Rizzi comes in. You're with the team. What's the vibe been like after that move was made, leading up to and then through finally getting a win?
We kind of talked about it as a media group that you couldn't tell that the locker room wasn't fun until that coaching change, because once they made that change, it was a lot more lively. Guys seemed to be having a lot more fun. And the rearranging of the locker room by interim head coach Darren Rizzi seemed to have a huge payoff. The defensive line group having fun with it, making their area a little club area. And that wasn't noticeable. We all thought that it was a fun locker room throughout the season, even when they were dominating in weeks 1 and 2. But it really was actually, those players just seemed like they were punching the clock to get in and get out. And now you can see the energy shift from Darren Rizzi in that locker room. Guys are having fun again. They're playing basketball again. They're joking. They're laughing. They're actually hanging out in there, something that they weren't doing to start the season.
And I guess it shows you that sometimes the little things can mean a lot, because little things behind the scenes, like just rearranging players and where they're sitting. And Rizzi, he's a unique guy. And I know in his opening press conference, he talked about, hey, I'm a fighter. I was Division II. I was a walk-on. I had to, free agent in the NFL. I started in D2, working his way up. So he's got a little spunk that looks like it carries over and influences these players.
I think one of the big things the players kind of keep saying about Rizzi is he's authentically himself. He hasn't changed since he took over as head coach, as interim head coach for the Saints. He's always been the same guy he's been since day one back in training camp, and that's something that really resonates with the players. And his energy and he's a huge accountability guy, and during a losing streak, you need someone to keep you accountable, and that really resonated with the players. And on top of that, him being a special teams coordinator, he has a relationship with pretty much everyone in that locker room. And on top of that, even the players who don't play special teams said, I have a relationship with him too. He always gives me a hug when I see him. He's just one of those guys that the players really can follow behind and lead.
Let me ask about one of the guys who might have bought in right away, and that's Alvin Kamara, because beginning of the season, all the talk was about his house being listed. Everybody thought he wanted to be traded. He wanted out of New Orleans. He's now signed a long-term agreement, has an outstanding game, and most importantly for him, and people like you I know will notice, he now has a C on his chest.
Yeah, and I think a huge part of that buy-in also, it kind of says a lot about Kamara signing that contract extension during that losing streak, saying I'm going to be here and I'm going to be in, and he'd be here for the long haul. And him being awarded a captain by Rizzi this past week really just was a long time coming, and shows he was a leader this whole time. He's not a big rah-rah guy. He says that himself. He doesn't talk a lot. He just wants people to follow what he does. He comes in, works hard, does his job, and he wants to be there for his teammates. And that resonated with Rizzi. He was one of the first guys to really buy into what Rizzi was telling them that they have to do to be able to dig themselves out of the hole they already put themselves in. Right. And he was rewarded with that captainship. And Rizzi said that once that was announced to the team, he got a huge round of applause. People were very happy for him. And that's not a surprise, knowing how Kamara is and how respected he is among his teammates.
Well, when you talk about the instant reaction and the acceptance of the players to Rizzi, his enthusiasm, do you think he's the kind of guy that could work his way into the full-time position, or do you think the Saints are going to ride him and his enthusiasm to try to dig out of a 7-game skid and then look elsewhere?
It's tough to really know what the Saints will do, just because making a midseason coaching change doesn't happen. The last time they did that and fired a coach was 1980. Before that, it was 1996. And so there is no real precedent to understand where the Saints will go. It wouldn't surprise me if Rizzi does get these Saints back on a win streak and somehow make it competitive near the end of the season, that he might be more considered. I also wouldn't be surprised if they decide to go in a different direction and just kind of blow the whole thing up in a sense and bring somebody fresh and new in that hasn't been there before, that can maybe get them back on the right path and do something different.
Yeah, and that's one of those phrases I know a lot of people say as we wrap up. You talk about blowing it up. You've already lost Lattimore because of the trade, huge salary cap. But salary cap is a dark cloud over this team. There are a lot of fan-favorite players. You might want to get used to seeing them now, because you might not be seeing them in the black and gold in the future.
I think, a lot of their older players are about at the time of their contract running out, a couple of years. I don't think the Saints can necessarily blow it up just because of how their salary cap situation is. I don't think they're completely resetting the bar, but I would expect that in a couple of years, you will start to see some new faces, and that maybe the Saints start to shift away from signing their veteran players to longer-term contracts like they have been.
Oh, the Saints have Cleveland coming up, and you know what? If they can keep winning, let's keep talking, because it's nice to actually talk fun with the black and gold. Sarah Polcheski, I appreciate you joining us, and good luck this weekend and the rest of the season with the Saints.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
All right, well, sending the Saints good karma with the new leadership.
And you know what, Karen? If they win it out, they might possibly have a postseason, so we're hoping for that.
All right, fingers crossed. The Delta Music Museum in downtown Faraday draws international visitors to the small town of 3,000 residents. Faraday has an outsized reputation as the hometown of Jerry Lee Lewis and his cousins Mickey Gilley and Jimmy Swaggart. I'm taking you on a tour of the museum, which is a featured stop along the Mississippi Blues Trail.
Every morning I wake up with the blues.
YZ Ely is in his late 80s and still performs his signature Delta blues tunes that helped put Faraday on the musical map. In the 1950s, YZ performed at Haney's Big House as the house band opening for big-name acts traveling the Chitlin Trail, a performance circuit for black musicians.
We had the opportunity to be the opening act for guys like B.B. King, Lil Milton, Larry Birdsong, Big Joe Turner, Elder James. I'm honored to have had that privilege to be the opening act for such big known band.
Today, YZ is playing in an exhibit that pays homage to his legacy at the Delta Music Museum and Arcade Theater in downtown Faraday.
Hi.
Karen, nice to see you.
Thank
Welcome
you.
to the Delta Music Museum. I think you're going to be really glad you came today. This is a great little jewel that houses a lot of musical history that all happened in this tiny little town. You are in the old Faraday Post Office. This old building was built in 1939 by the WPA, and a local gentleman saved the building. It was going to be torn down and donated it to the state of Louisiana. The Secretary of State's office for the state of Louisiana operates this museum, and we're just very fortunate that we get to honor our three famous cousins that are from this town. Of course, Reverend Jimmy Swaggart, one of the first televangelists on television, Mickey Gilley, urban cowboy, and of course the killer Jerry Lee Lewis. All born in the year 1935, learned to play in the Pentecostal church, and everybody knew them around town. There's some other stuff I'd like to show you too here, in addition to the
Let's take a walk.
During the 1950s, blues, gospel, and country music in the Delta region converged in a musical mashup known as rockabilly. The museum honors these genres and musicians with ties to Louisiana. Faraday's claim to fame begins with the birth of Jerry Lee Lewis, a pianist, singer, and songwriter nicknamed The Killer, rock and roll's first great wild man.
He was a good old homegrown boy. He always was introduced, and that was part of what he would tell everybody. Jerry Lee Lewis from Faraday, Louisiana. That's what he always wanted, and he got it.
Sherry McMahon helped foster the museum in its infancy. It's a tribute to her famous cousins, Jerry Lee Lewis, Jimmy Swaggart, and Mickey Gilley.
It was like a vortex. Just met here, and those mamas got pregnant with those babies. There will never be anybody else like them in the world. But Jerry Lee, there'll never be another killer. We do hope people will come and see all the exhibits here of all the fabulous people.
Faraday is the unlikely wellspring of talent with local and regional ties. Country singer Conway Twitty lived in nearby Tallulah. An exhibit of his stage costumes, awards, and records stand alongside exhibits of living legend Irma Thomas, tributes to Frogman Henry from New Orleans, who was the opening act for the Beatles, and Louisiana Hayride radio star Johnny Horton.
The principal genres of music that went into making early rock and roll and rockabilly music were gospel, country music, and rhythm and blues. And all of that was in abundance right here in this central part of the Mississippi Delta. People latched onto it. There was just something in the soil, as they say.
Delta Blues is at the core of Faraday's musical legacy, fostered by Haney's Big House, which put on Sunday night shows.
Mr. Will Haney, we loved him. I grew up about 3 blocks from his juke joint. I would hear the music from Mr. Will Haney's wafting in the window, and that's where Jerry Lee would sneak in.
This is our replica of the famous, internationally famous, Haney's Big House. It was the launching pad for the greatest musical artist of the day. This was a place where people like Ray Charles, B.B. King, Little Richard, they all played at Haney's Big House because it was on what was known as the Chitlin Circuit.
The birth of the blues came from slavery. The way of life was slavery. The only, in my point of view, is to find a peace of mind, was to just sing and harmonize. It gives me the privilege is to hold on to something that belonged to me and belonged to my race.
The old arcade theater stands next door to the museum, and on this day, we find artist Grantham Molnar painting the murals of Faraday's musical roots. The theater serves as a community gathering space for culture and arts events. Admission is free, and marketing is by word of mouth. Yet somehow, international tourists find their way to downtown Faraday. Many superfans of these celebrated musical greats.
What is it about Faraday that breeds all this homegrown talent, these musical greats?
I don't know, it's just something in the Delta. It drifted into Faraday. Up the river or down the river, it just raised a whole lot of talent.
That's our show for this week. Remember, you can watch anything LPB anytime, wherever you are, with our LPB app.
That's right, and you can catch LPB news and public affairs shows, as well as other Louisiana programs you've come to enjoy over the years. And please, like us on Facebook, X, and Instagram.
For everyone at Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Karen LeBlanc.
And I'm Dorothea Wilson. Until next time, that's the state we're in.
Support for Louisiana, the state we're in, is provided by
Entergy Louisiana is strengthening our power grid throughout the state. We're reinforcing infrastructure to prepare for stronger storms, reduce outages, and respond quicker when you do need us, because together we power life.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum, located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is a historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And by Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Center. Visit Baton Rouge. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and viewers like you. Thank you.